Hey guys, how's it going? We are live for our Monday Night Football live stream for our matchup between the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers. And what is going to be Ben Roethlisberger's last home game. Me as a Steeler fan, really looking forward to this. And overall, expect to see pretty good performance from Ben. In his last home performance, I do expect him to be a little bit more free with actually throwing the ball downfield. You've actually seen him have some success doing that in the past. So in your last game, kind of like what Kobe did in his last game, shooters go out there and shoot, and gunslingers are going to go out there and throw the rock around. And I'm expecting a very entertaining, close matchup tonight. Obviously, hoping that the Steelers come through with a win, but either way, expecting some fireworks and some good entertainment. On the screen here, you guys can see our projections for tonight. Of course, if you want access to these projections, you know where to find them. That is on the Patreon page. We'll be updating these up until lock, but as of right now, the Vegas has it at a 43 point over under as of right now. It was at 43 and a half a little bit earlier on today, but you can see obviously a little bit of action on the under there. They've taken it from 43 in the hook down to just 43 points. The spread, 3.5 points for the Browns, which we'll get to here in a second. I'm not necessarily sure if I agree with that line. Overall, though, regardless of the spread, I do expect this to be a higher scoring game than where Vegas has it. First and foremost, that Steelers defense, absolutely atrocious, especially against the run. And if there's anything these Cleveland Browns can do, it is run the ball down your throat. So I do expect them to put up plenty of points in this game. And of course, with Ben Roethlisberger, which I've already alluded to, it's his last game. He's going to be freewheeling it out there, throwing the ball downfield, doing what he loves to do. And you're going to see him put up fantasy production as a result. So I don't expect this to be, a 43-point type of game. We're looking at maybe 1 to 2 touchdowns per side. I'm looking at something closer to 3.5 touchdowns per game, closer to something like a 55 or 56 point over under. As a result, rather than focusing on these running backs, like I expect a lot of the rest of the industry to do, and particularly for the Cleveland Brown sides, I get it. In general, though, I want plenty of action with these pass catchers as well, particularly on the Steelers. I mean, obviously, this is a little bit narrative based, but when you're playing your last home game for a team that you've been there for 18 years, you're going to have some extra incentive to go out there and play well. So Ben Roethlisberger at a fair price of $9,400 is somebody I'll be willing to use at captain and in my flex position. You can see that he's garnering a fair amount of ownership. That's to be expected. Everyone knows about this narrative tonight, but as a Steeler fan, I could not, tolerate myself if we went out there and had a huge game and I wasn't on in the circumstance. Numbers there, though, the Browns defense, very good secondary, particularly over there on the right side, best quarter in the NFL, in my opinion. At the same time, though, huge injuries in the rest of that defense. While they have some splash players like a Myles Garrett and whatnot, they also lack depth. So at a lot of those secondary corner positions, particularly the slot corner, at safety as well, I'm not dealing with the best players. So they have the spots on the defense you can take them apart at. So perhaps somebody like a Deontay Johnson, it's likely to see a lot of that shadow coverage, might get shut down, whereas somebody like a Chase Claypool might be able to take the ball over the top and have a big day. So we'll talk about some of the one-on-one matchups as we get a little bit further into the video. In terms of the passing side for the Browns, might be a little bit overlooked, right? Obviously, their bread and butter is going to be running the football, particularly with a Nick Chubb. Expected to have Kareem Hunt back. And if they really want to mix in Dearness Johnson, he's proven to be effective as well. So we know that's what they're best at. We're likely to see that a little bit more. If you're in a large field type of GPP, sure, take a few shots on Baker Mayfield. He's had a few ceiling games this year. I only see a few because they've been far in between. Haven't seen them that often. If you're in like a single entry, 2 to 3 max type of thing, probably an unnecessary risk to go and take them there. More for some of those large field millie maker type of events. Let's talk about the running backs now. Nick Chubb, as we've already outlined, even though he's extremely expensive at $11,600, I definitely think that's well warranted. He's likely to see 20 to 25 touches against arguably the worst rushing defense in the NFL. If you take a look at the numbers over the last 2 months, that is exactly what is happening to the Steelers team. Whether it's a lack of tackling, just a lack of size on that defensive front, absolutely getting bullied no matter the rushing team, let alone one of the best rushing attacks in the NFL in the Browns. I believe ranked number 3 in the NFL in terms of their rushing attempts and yardage, just behind the 49ers and I believe the Eagles as well, but still great rushing attack. Nick Chubb, I believe second highest rushing yards per carry in the entire NFL, only behind Might be Lamar Jackson at this point. It's a quarterback too. So in terms of running backs, he's getting the most efficiency out there. You can't go wrong with him at the captain slot. The one thing I'll say is he's extremely expensive. I mean, he's a good $3,000 more than these quarterbacks at the captain slot. But if you can find the value to put him there, definitely go ahead and utilize him. Najee Harris is interesting as well. I'm a little bit more interested in some of these wide receivers for the Steelers. But if the Steelers go to a rush-heavy attack, they've tried to in every single game this year. The issue is they just haven't been able to run the ball effectively. They've sure tried, giving him 20 to 25 touches per game. The issue is he's getting, 2.5, 3 yards per carry. This Browns defense does have a solid front seven, so I don't expect that to change. But if you're somebody who likes to buy in on opportunity when somebody's getting a lot of touches, obviously he's talented. I mean, Najee Harris is breaking more tackles than anyone else in the NFL per rush. The guy's hurdling people at 250 pounds. I don't think I'm going on a limit saying this. He's the most talented running back in the NFL. There's no one else with his type of skill set. Who's to say that he doesn't go out there and absolutely shred a defense at this point? I wouldn't be that surprised. So much like a Baker Mayfield and large field type of GPPs, I think he gives you a lot of upside at lower ownership than he should be. I mean, in some of these other showdown slates in past, you were looking at 80, 90% ownership on them. If we're looking at 60% ownership for somebody like a Najee Harris, first off, I think that's appropriate. At a point where I'm probably looking to try and get at least a little bit of leverage. I think he's a great buyback stack if you're trying to stack the Browns heavy, because even if the Steelers get behind, they're going to be throwing the ball to Najee Harris, and they've shown in the past that they won't completely abandon the run. Let's talk about some of these value options here. Not really that much to speak home about. I guess Demetric Felton would be my guy of choice. He's only $200. We've seen him utilized as a wide receiver, particularly when they had a lot of guys out of the lineup. Now, granted, they've gone healthy at this point. Almost everybody back, not anybody on the IR or even the COVID list at this point. So he's a little bit more likely to be phased out of this offense. But at $200, if he goes out there, gets you a catch or two, could very well pay off that price tag, because again, these running backs are going to be a priority on the slate, but they're extremely pricey. And the same thing with these quarterbacks and some of these top end wide receivers. So you might have to take a Demetric Felton, even if he's only getting us 3 to 4 points, just because of that salary savings. So particularly in large field tournaments, I think he's worth a gander, but he's still junior, probably at most going to see 4 targets between touches and catches in a game. And at $1,000, if he was $200, like a Felton might be worth a shot or two on, but a little bit too expensive for me. At wide receiver, you see a little bit of a nice price range here. I mean, Deontay Johnson at $10,400, that seems appropriate. But from Jarvis Landry the whole way down to Donovan Peoples-Jones, you're looking at favorable price tags. And again, with a type of over-under here that I expect to be a little bit higher than where Vegas has it. Again, I have it closer to 53 or 54 actual points. These wide receivers could very well exceed their projections. So let's talk about some of my favorite options here. First and foremost, Deontay Johnson. Sorry about that. Extremely consistent for this Steelers team. You're looking at him getting 8 to 12 targets essentially every single game. And when he gets closer to that 10 to 12 target range, you're looking at 25 to 30 fantasy points. Particularly if he ends up getting into the end zone, he get at the top end of that range. So really like him in terms of a captain pick, especially in terms of the flex position, especially if Big Ben's going to be throwing the ball a little bit more this game. That means that Deontay Johnson should hit the top end of his volatility, which is extremely favorable, particularly in a single game type of circumstance. Jarvis Landry, $8,400. Even though they're getting a lot of the receivers back over there in Cleveland, Jarvis Landry is the clear alpha male there. $8,400, I'd say it's an appropriate price tag. But as a result, you can see his ownership's tempered, right? He's not in that 40, 50, 60% range like some of these other top end options are. He's right there at 28 and right around 28.5%. At the captain slot, single digit ownership. So that's really where you're getting a lot of the upside with a Jarvis Landry. It's the clear number one option there. But much like a Baker Mayfield, I'd say these two are extremely tied together. When Baker hits his ceiling, Jarvis Landry is extremely likely as well, and vice versa. They're more GPP type of plays. Not quite as reliable as you'd be hoping for a cash, for single entry, 2 to 3 maxes, that kind of thing. But well within the fold for some of those larger field events. Chase Claypool, a little bit of a pivot option off of Deontay Johnson on the Steelers team. He's definitely had an off year, hasn't seen quite the usage that he saw as a rookie. Deontay Johnson has just been an absolute hog for this offense, looking at 45% level usage. But Chase Claypool, he gets targeted deep down the field in terms of air yardage. Is right up there among the league leaders in terms of air yardage. The issue is him and Ben just haven't connected very much this year. So much like a Najee Harris, who hasn't been very effective in a yards per rush type of circumstance, Chase Claypool hasn't been very effective in a yards per catch type of circumstance, but is at least getting that type of opportunity. So at his very flexible price tag of $7,200, perhaps even $10,800 at captain, is definitely somebody I'm taking a look at even in some single entry to 2 to 3 max stuff. I was a little bit more reliable than somebody like a Jarvis Landry, just because I'm counting on Ben throwing the ball, absolutely airing it out today, and trying to put up some type of performance in his last home game. Down here with Donovan Peoples-Jones, you can also see that he's somebody I already have in the captain slot in my first set of lineups here. $5,000, great price tag on him. And the real key here is that he has real deep play upside. He's not only got a large frame, going to be targeted in the red zone, but really could take a 5-yard slant, could take a go route 80 yards for a touchdown. He has the speed necessary, the yards after catch ability, whereas a lot of the other guys on this team, particularly Jarvis Landry, doesn't really have that X factor to their game. So he could pay off his price tag with one catch here. He's seen plenty of usage in this offense over the last few weeks as well, which is always great to see. Rashard Higgins, more of just a flyer pick. Much like a Baker Mayfield and whatnot. He'll be in my player pool, but not somebody I'm really counting on as a core pick. His usage is lower than a Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's more expensive, and as of right now, garnering right around the same amount of ownership. In terms of flyer plays, James Washington is going to see some snaps for the Steelers team. He's been extremely effective, had some really impressive catches over the last 2 to 3 games. That's why he's earned a little bit more snap share for this offense. And to me, it's surprising he hasn't been a factor, particularly because Ray McLeod III is more of a returner than everything. He doesn't really catch the ball with his hands. He lets the ball come to him. He's not really making sideline catches, that kind of thing. And while he can be a decent route runner, somebody like a James Washington can take the top off at defense. And with Big Ben going out there gunslinging it tonight, if you're following that type of narrative, trying to build lineups behind that type of build, guys like James Washington are a lot more attractive than somebody like a Ray McLeod. So I like him there. Better price tag at $2,200. Anthony Schwartz for the Browns. We're not sure how much snaps he's going to play, but if somebody from that top 3 goes down, if he's thrust into a larger role than we expect, could pay off that price tag. He's extremely cheap at just $1,400. But pretty much everyone cheaper than him in this entire game. Can't really rely on them to play many snaps. Whereas in Anthony Schwartz, he's going to get at least right around a 25% snap share, at least going to be playing on the field. Whereas some of the guys on this team, like a Bradley and whatnot, might not even be active tonight. So that's where I'm going to be going at wide receiver. Now moving on to tight end, which is always an important position to cover when it comes to Showdown, because we're always seeing some of these random tight ends score touchdowns. Or, of course, Pat Freiermuth a few weeks ago for the Steelers in prime time was the optimal captain, right? It's not really someone we think of when it comes to his ceiling type performance. But if the Vegas line is true and we see something closer to 43 real points scored, if Freiermuth scores 2 touchdowns, he can end up in the optimal lineup as a captain. So we saw it happen before this year. I'm not counting on it, though. Again, that was more of an outlier than the norm. If you're playing in a large field tournament, sure, mix in 5 to 6 shares of Freiermuth at captain. The price tag is certainly extremely flexible at just under $10,000 for your captain. Probably able to fit in both quarterbacks if you really wanted to. I don't think you really need to force that in, though. More often than not, though, I'm trying to fit in one of these 2 running backs if I'm taking somebody like a Freiermuth at captain and trying to get a little bit more salary. In terms of some of these other tight ends here, David Njoku is probably the most interesting to me just because of his red zone usage. This is somebody who has a lot of yards after catch ability. He's got a very large frame. They're not afraid to throw fade routes to him, all that sort of stuff. So at $4,200, if he scores a touchdown, could very well crack the optimal lineup. In terms of captain exposure, he had that one massive game this year where he took 2 catches for over 75 yards for a touchdown. That is the outlier of all outliers, right? So I don't think he really has that type of ceiling in him. We've only seen that once in his career. If he ends up going out there scoring 3 touchdowns tonight, so be it. That's just not the type of game that he has. In terms of these pure punt plays, Harrison Bryant, because both of these tight ends are back, probably not somebody you want to invest in, at least at $3,000. If he was closer to $200, like we've seen multiple times this year at this point, he would definitely be worth a look, right? Or even his Zach Gentry, $800, that's too expensive, right? He's going to see 30, at the most 40% snaps for this team, much more of a blocking tight end than a receiving tight end. Not necessarily sure you're looking at him hitting a ceiling type of performance. Now to wrap up with our defenses and our kickers, I'll remind you guys, because we're doing this live, a little bit of a different format here today because we've got golf going on. I got a bunch of different content I'm trying to get out. You go ahead and leave a question down, comment, anything like that, and I'll get to it here at the end, particularly if it's a question in terms of lineups and whatnot. We'll go ahead and cover that before we get out of here. But in terms of the defenses, Steelers and Browns, because I expect this to be a relatively higher scoring game than where Vegas has it, not really trying to prioritize them. I'm going to have a little bit of exposure to each side just in case, but I'm looking right around 10, maybe 15% at the max on either of these teams. And you can see that's going to be well below the field. So I'm looking at getting a little bit of negative leverage here, but much like any slate, you never know when a defense is going to go out there, score a touchdown, that kind of thing. Or in the Cowboys' case a few weeks ago, score 2 touchdowns in a game and absolutely break the slate. So in some of my large field stuff, I will have exposure to these defenses. But in single entry, my main lineup, any cash lineups, no one I'm prioritizing. At kicker, because I expect it to be a relatively high-scoring game, I'm willing to take these kickers. They're both appropriately priced, $4,000 to $3,800 a piece. You're not going to be writing home about them. I wouldn't be using them at the captain slot by any means, but you can expect about 7, maybe 8 points from either team if they end up being in a high-scoring affair. In terms of median projection, you see I have them closer to 5.86 points. That's reflective of the 43-point over-under. If we're looking at something closer to 55, 56 points like I personally expect, you're looking at a 2.5-point bonus to each of these kickers. So really do like that in terms of the range of outcomes. Again, nothing I'm using at the captain slot by any means, but in terms of mixing in plays in a large field GPP, definitely worth a few cracks. A couple things I want to touch on before we get on out of here. There's a few lineup builds I'm taking a look at because I do expect this to be a relatively competitive game. Most of my stacks are going to be within a 4-2. And what I mean by 4-2 is at most taking 4 players from one team and running it back with 2. And I have plenty of 3-3s where I'm taking 3 players from each team. But for me to go to a 5-1, probably not going to happen tonight. I don't expect this to be a lopsided affair. And for a lineup like that to be optimal, you're really looking at some really wacky pricing by the Draftkings algorithm. And the pricing here is extremely fair for tonight. Or you're looking at a blowout, right? Like a 35-7 type of game. And I just don't see that in the range of outcomes tonight. So my lineups are going to be within that 4-2 range. I would assume a lot of 3-3 lineups, and I'm going to be mixing in quite a few Steelers 4-2 lineups. Not only are you getting better prices on some of the Steelers, I mean, an $800 difference between the top end running backs. Sure, Deontay Johnson's a lot more expensive than a Jarvis Landry, but these Steelers wide receivers, James Washington, Chase Claypool, Pat Freiermuth, they're all very reasonably priced. So I'll be going that way very often tonight. Obviously, as a Steeler fan myself, I don't think you guys should be surprised to hear that. But in terms of projection, in terms of points per dollar, points that way as well. So it's glad that my fandom and the numbers align at times. And when that happens, it tends to be golden. So good luck with all of your lineups tonight, guys. If you have any questions, you're watching this on replay, do not be shy to put any of those questions down in the chat. Again, thank you guys for stopping by and enjoying the content. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, make sure you guys go ahead and do so. And I'll see you guys next time.